This is Community Radio Networks. And today, ladies and gentlemen, is Tuesday, the 6th of August. We have all the information that you need to take on the day today, right here on Community Radio Networks. And we'll start with the world news. This is Community Radio Networks, the world news read by Shabnam Matkil. Bangladesh's president dissolved parliament this morning, paving the way for the formation of an interim government a day after Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina resigned and fled the country following a violent crackdown on a student-led uprising. A statement from President Muhammad Shahabuddin's office also said that Hasina's arch-rival, Bangladesh Nationalist Party chairperson Begum Khalida Zia, a former prime minister, has been freed from house arrest. Protest leaders want Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus to lead interim government as the ex-prime minister Khalida Zia has been released from house arrest. Meanwhile, it is the death toll from these protests that has risen to 413 after 113 were killed yesterday, and there are global calls for calm and peaceful democratic transition. Families are waiting as some political prisoners are getting freed, and this unrest began last month in the form of protests against civil service job quotas and then escalated into wider calls for Hasina to stand down. The 76-year-old has been in power since 2009 but was accused of rigging elections in January and then watched millions of people take to the streets over the past month demanding she step down. More than 400 people died as security forces sought to quell the unrest, but the protests grew and she finally fled Bangladesh aboard a helicopter yesterday as the military turned against her. Her flight ended her 15-year second stint in power. She had ruled the country for 20 of the last 30 years, having inherited the political movement of her father, state founder Mujibur Rahman, who was assassinated in 1975. Bangladesh's Army Chief General Wakaruddin Zaman has due to meet student leaders to discuss the formation of an interim government expected to hold elections soon after it takes over. He announced the resignation yesterday, and Sheikh Hasina flew to India and staying at a safe house outside New Delhi. And we also do have the army chief who announced the ex-PM's resignation, says the interim government is in the works. She was freed from, Khalida Zia was freed from prison. Jubilation on the streets as protesters stormed the premier's palace, and 66 deaths were reported at that time. The curfew has ended today. The release of detained protesters ordered, and the world calls for call for ensuring a peaceful transition. Just hours after the Bangladeshi Prime Minister resigned and fled the country's president said he would dissolve parliament and form the interim government. The protest organizers have proposed Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus as the head of the interim government to be formed after Bangladesh's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina resigned and fled to India. And he has called Bangladesh now a free country after Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina resigned among these violent protests. Of course, it was he who faced over 190 charges under her government, accused her of acting like a dictator and damaging her father's legacy. He was convicted of embezzling $2 million from a workers' welfare fund. Muhammad Yunus attributed the protest violence to public anger, which could not be expressed through rigged elections. He expressed hope for future leadership by the youth and emphasized adherence to democratic principles. He accepted a proposal to be the chief advisor for an interim government as Bangladesh on edge awaiting the formation of a new government. We do also have the 76-year-old and her small entourage that flew into the Hindon Air Base near New Delhi in a Bangladesh Air Force aircraft late yesterday afternoon, hours after she quit following massive public protests calling for the ouster of her government. And National Security Advisor of India, Ajit Doval, and senior military officials met her at the airbase shortly after her arrival. It is External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, who today said that India is in regular touch with the authorities in Bangladesh, which is in the grip of a political crisis after its prime minister resigned and fled to India, and said he is monitoring the situation with respect to the minorities in the neighboring countries. There are an estimated 19,000 Indian nationals in Bangladesh, of which 9,000 are students. The bulk of these students have already returned to India in the month of July on the advice of the High Commission. New Delhi has assured Sheikh Hasina of help. External Affairs Minister Jai Shankar told an all-party meeting in the national capital this morning that he told politicians that Sheikh Hasina was in shock after being forced to leave her country, and the government has given her time before discussing her next course of action. It was reported that she was to travel to London from New Delhi. However, she is now contemplating other options after the British government indicated she may not get legal protection in the UK against any possible investigation. So her original plans to move to London and seek political asylum there are on hold. Meanwhile, protesters had stormed the Bangladesh consulate in New York and took down the portrait of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Visuals showed protesters barging inside the building and taking down this portrait of the founder of Bangladesh. All right, moving to another part of the world. Israel bracing for a potential multi-day attack by Iran and Hezbollah after the assassination of two senior militant leaders in Beirut and Tehran. Iran and its allies have vowed to retaliate against Israel for these killings, with Hezbollah launching a drone attack on northern Israel and Iran threatening punishment. Diplomatic efforts are ongoing to reduce tensions in the region, with multiple countries urging their citizens to leave Lebanon due to the risk of military escalation there. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation will hold an open-ended extraordinary meeting of its executive committee at the foreign ministers level tomorrow to discuss this ongoing crimes of the Israeli occupation against the Palestinian people, including the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh and its aggressions against Iran's sovereignty. The meeting will be held at the General Secretariat in Jeddah, and the meeting has been convened in response to the atrocities being committed by the Israeli forces against the Palestinian people, particularly in the Gaza Strip. To date, it said Israeli actions have resulted in the deaths of almost 40,000 individuals, mostly women and children, and injuries to over 91,000 Palestinians. Also, civilian properties, including 430,000 homes, have been destroyed, along with infrastructure, hospitals, schools, mosques, and historical buildings. 2 million Palestinians have been displaced due to these attacks. And several countries have urged their nationals to leave Lebanon as fears grow of wider conflict in the Middle East. Joseph Borrell, the European Union's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, has issued a new plea to end the war in Gaza, which he warns has brought the region to the brink of a war of unknown proportions. Markus Faber, the chairman of the Bundestag's Defense Committee, has expressed skepticism about deploying the Bundeswehr, Germany's armed forces, in the Middle East conflict. Several U.S. personnel were injured in a suspected rocket attack at Al-Assad military base in Iraq yesterday. Tensions across the Middle East spiking following the recent killings of the senior Hezbollah commander in Lebanon and Hamas's top political leader in Iran. An Iranian-backed Iraqi militia have resumed launching attacks on bases housing U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria after a lull of several months. The U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller has said the U.S. has been urging countries through its diplomatic engagements to tell Iran that escalation in the Middle East is not in their interest. As the Middle East braces for potential escalation of hostilities, diplomats at the State Department in Washington, D.C. are trying to rally allies and partners to pressure Tehran into containing that scope of its retaliation against Israel that U.S. officials now view as inevitable. The U.S. Navy is sending another aircraft carrier to the Middle East. It's the fourth sent to respond to this ongoing crisis in the tumultuous region in the past 10 months. And with this move, more than a third of the carrier fleet will have been involved at one point or another. It is the U.S. commander in charge of forces in the Middle East who has already arrived in Israel for joint preparations over an expected revenge attack from Iran and Hezbollah. General Michael Eric Kurilla met Israeli Army Chief Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi and held a joint situational assessment on security and strategic issues, as well as joint preparations in the region as part of the response to threats in the Middle East. Vice President Kamala Harris officially became the Democratic nominee for president yesterday after a 5-day virtual roll call process ended. She is expected to announce her running mate today before kicking off a 5-day campaign tour across 7 battleground states. She has reportedly whittled down her choice from a broad bench of candidates to supposedly two leading contenders, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Shapiro's statewide approval rating, 54%, is seen as an asset for a campaign seeking to secure Pennsylvania's 19 electoral votes. Meanwhile, Walz has risen in betting markets amid viral media clips and speculated appeal to Midwestern voters. A running mate's impact on elections may nonetheless be relatively small. It is a recent poll showing she's closing in on former President Trump's lead, with Trump holding a 1 percentage point national lead over her, down from his 3-point lead over President Biden last month. Vice President Kamala Harris set to name her running mate today ahead of a 7-state swing through some of the biggest battleground states, starting in Pennsylvania. Her campaign has raised $310 million last month, more than double Republican Donald Trump's haul, and she is set out this week on the swing state campaign blitz, giving her a far heavier travel schedule than her opponent, former President Trump. A critical week for her as she's rushing to introduce herself to voters just 3 months until Election Day, and it will also be the first time she will appear with her yet-to-be-announced running mate today. Starting today, campaigning across 7 swing states over 5 days, one of the heaviest weeks of campaign-related travel in the general election. And also, we do have another member of the squad of progressive lawmakers fighting for political survival in today's primaries, which will also put former President Trump's endorsement to the test once again, including in Michigan's crucial battleground Senate race. Representative Cori Bush's Democratic primary in Missouri is among the most expensive and hotly contested races today, when voters in 4 states, Missouri, Washington, Michigan, and Kansas, pick their party's nominees in congressional and state races. Usha Vance downplayed her husband's past comments about unmarried, childless women as a quip that the opponents have taken out of context. They're defending him amid criticism that has surged since his nomination to be the Republican vice presidential candidate. She said on Fox and Friends that since joining former President Trump's ticket, J.D. Vance has come under significant public scrutiny over resurfaced comments, including a clip of him suggesting parents should have more political power than Americans without children, and calling Vice President Kamala Harris and other Democrats childless cat ladies. According to his wife, it was something that was taken out of context. She argued her husband had intended to discuss the challenges of being a parent in the U.S. and how policies may make it more difficult for parents to succeed. Tropical storm Debbie moved menacingly into some of America's most historic southern cities and expected to bring prolonged downpours and flooding throughout the day today, after slamming into Florida yesterday and prompting the rescue of hundreds from flooded homes. Record-setting rain from the storm that killed at least 5 people yesterday, causing flash flooding with up to 30 inches possible in some areas. And the storm center over southeastern Georgia early this morning, with maximum sustained winds near 45 miles per hour. And the center is expected to move off Georgia's coast later today, and some strengthening is forecast for tomorrow and Thursday as Debbie drifts offshore before it moves inland over South Carolina on Thursday. Tropical storm Debbie's reach now much more than what it was yesterday. U.S. stocks were poised for a rebound from a 3-day rout that has wiped out a healthy chunk of 2024's market gains. Futures tied to the S&P 500 up 0.09%, while those on the tech-heavy Nasdaq rose 1%. Dow Jones Industrial Average futures rose 0.8%. Stocks got crushed yesterday, part of a 2-day tailspin on Wall Street that served as a boisterous reaction to fresh concern over the health of the U.S. economy and its labor market. Stocks finished last week under pressure. They began this week in the same state. When the closing bell rang on Wall Street yesterday, the Nasdaq had shed 3.4%, deepening losses after tumbling into a correction last week. And Wall Street's stock sell-off intensified in a major way as the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell over 1,000 points due to concerns over the health of the U.S. economy. Overnight carnage in Asian markets that sent U.S. stocks futures off as much as 6% in the pre-dawn hours yesterday created a new strain of worry about the state of the yen carry trade. And the price of cryptocurrencies captured the breadth of the risk-off move in markets as Bitcoin and Ether tumbled down some of their largest one-week losses since the collapse of FTX. Meanwhile, a federal judge yesterday ruled Google violated antitrust laws by illegally holding a monopoly on online search and text advertising. The verdict comes in the first and biggest tech antitrust trial in over 2 decades and could alter how technology giants conduct business in the modern internet era. The U.S. Justice Department, along with over 30 state attorneys general, had sued Google in 2020 for allegedly paying more than $10 billion per year to web browsers and phone manufacturers to become the default search engine across those platforms, and yesterday's ruling found Google paid over $26 billion in 2021 alone to secure such agreements. The ruling also found Google controls nearly 90% of the world's general search services market on desktop devices and 95% on mobile devices. Last year, Google's advertising unit generated roughly $238 billion, triple the revenue in 2016. Walt Disney and Marvel Studios' Deadpool and Wolverine continue dominating the box office, grossing $824 million globally after 2 weekends in release. The movie raked $38.5 million in Thursday previews, reaching a record for an R-rated film. And Grok, a startup developing chips to run generative AI models faster than conventional processors, said it has raised $640 million in a new funding round led by BlackRock, Neuberger Berman, Type 1 Ventures, Cisco, KDDI, and Samsung Catalyst Fund also participated. Billionaire Elon Musk revived a lawsuit against ChatGPT maker OpenAI and its CEO Sam Altman, saying the firm put profits and commercial interests ahead of the public good. A new Miss USA has been crowned. Miss Michigan Alma Cooper took the crown during the pageant's 73rd annual ceremony and comes after the resignation of a previous title holder caused controversy and spawned shakeups at the Miss USA organization. Miss Kentucky Connor Perry and Miss Oklahoma Danica Christopherson were first and second runners-up, respectively. As the daughter of a migrant worker, a proud Afro-Latina woman, and an officer in the United States Army, she said she was living the American dream. It is Alma Cooper, Miss Michigan, 22 years old, who became Miss USA. American gymnast Simone Biles didn't get the golden send-off that she sought. She earned silver in the floor exercise finals yesterday, a 4th medal in Paris, and 11th Olympic medal overall, after a routine that included a couple of costly steps out of bounds. She had a tough time on the balance team in the penultimate women's gymnastic event of the year. Biles and Suni Lee both fell off the apparatus, ending in 5th and 6th place, respectively. She still won silver on the floor, giving her an 11th Olympic medal. USA now at 79, while China at 53 and France at 48. Voices across the globe express concern over the growing number of arrests in Venezuela following last week's disputed elections. Pope Francis said Venezuela is living a critical situation in his traditional remarks at the Vatican, adding that I appeal to all parties to seek the truth and to avoid all kinds of violence. The remarks came hours after Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro announced last weekend that the government has arrested 2,000 opponents at a rally in the Venezuelan capital of Caracas. He pledged to detain more people and send them to prison. As violent riots by far-right groups continue to take place across the UK after the tragic stabbing of 3 young girls at a camp in Southport, the Home Office has announced the introduction of a new rapid response security scheme for mosques. According to a government statement, under the new process now in place, the police, local authorities and mosques can ask for rapid security to be deployed to protect communities and allow for a return to worship as quickly as possible. Mosques are increasing security amid these riots, particularly after the mosque attack in Southport, as Muslims in West London also warned of far-right allies. Police have stepped in to guard the Muslims. UK authorities face growing pressure to put an end to England's worst rioting in 13 years amid far-right agitation after hatred based on misinformation was spread on social media against immigrants and Muslims. Nigeria, Australia, Indonesia, and a number of other countries have warned their citizens about travelling to the UK as a spate of anti-immigrant riots grip cities across Britain. The UK's worst social unrest in years, sparked by the stabbing death of 3 young children in Stockport, northwest England, last week. Anti-Semitic incidents in the Czech Republic sharply increased last year, with their peak appearing in the final quarter of 2023 following the deadly Hamas attacks on Israel on the 7th of October. And it is hundreds that gathered at a Somalia beach hotel, the site of an attack claimed by Al-Qaeda's East Africa affiliate that left 37 people dead and dozens wounded, to condemn the violence and demand stronger security measures in this news out of Mogadishu. It is Al-Shabaab that said its militants carried out the attack on the popular Lido Beach in the capital of Mogadishu, and witnesses said they saw an attacker wearing an explosive vest moments before he blew himself up. About 40 people have been arrested in northern Nigeria for waving Russia's national flag during protests against the high cost of living and what they feel is bad governance. Amid this crackdown, the Army Chief Christopher Musa warned that it is a treasonable offense to fly the flags of foreign countries. Nigeria has been seen 6 days of nationwide protests in which at least 7 people have died and more than 700 have been arrested. Demonstrators have been chanting slogans such as "We are hungry," while a minority have been pictured waving Russia's flag and voicing support for President Putin. A landslide triggered by heavy rains in southern Ethiopia's Wolaita area killed at least 13 people, and the number of fatalities is expected to rise. In this news out of Addis Ababa. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the World News on Community Radio Networks. Gunmen stormed a helicopter and killed its New Zealand pilot shortly after it landed in Indonesia's restive Papua region, and they released 2 health workers and 2 children that it was carrying. A pilot for Indonesian aviation company PT Intan Angkasa Air Service was shot to death by gunmen allegedly by the West Papua Liberation Army, the armed wing of the Free Papua movement, after landing in Alama, which is a remote village in the Mimika district of central Papua province. A prominent Vietnamese business tycoon was found guilty of defrauding stockholders of nearly $150 million by falsely inflating the value of his company, in a case that comes as the government cracks down on widespread corruption in the country. In this news from Hanoi. Japanese leaders rushed this morning to assuage concerns about the sharp swings in the country's financial markets, with the Prime Minister urging calm and senior finance officials convening an emergency meeting to discuss the global stock market sell-off. The executives from Japan's Ministry of Finance, the Financial Services Agency, and the Bank of Japan held trilateral meetings today after Atsushi Mimura, the country's top currency diplomat, emphasizing close coordination between the government and the central bank. West Bengal's governor, C.V. Ananda Bose, asserted that India's border with Bangladesh was secure amid the turmoil in the neighboring country and urged people to not pay attention to any rumors. He constituted a watchdog panel that could be contacted round the clock to clarify any disinformation. The Border Security Force issuing a high alert across all its formations along the 4,000-kilometer India-Bangladesh border in the wake of the developments in the neighboring country. The recent political crisis in Bangladesh, triggered by violent protests and the ousting of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, has raised concerns about its impact on Indian businesses. Since she took over in 2009, Bangladesh has been a key ally for India, and her departure could pose risk to trade and economic stability in the region. The stock of Marico, known for its Saffola edible oil, dropped by over 4%, and Pearl Global Industries, which gets roughly 25% of its revenue from Bangladesh, reported a decline in its shares by over 3%. Shares of Imami also fell by over 4%, and others include Bayer Corporation, GCPL, Britannia, Vikas Lifecare, Dabur, Asian Paints, Pidilite, and Jubilant Foodworks, as well as Bajaj Auto. The crisis has also brought mixed outcomes for India's textile and garment manufacturers, and the situation raised questions about the power supply agreement between Adani Power Limited and Bangladesh. Meanwhile, as many as 22 fishermen were arrested by the Sri Lankan Navy for crossing the maritime border. The Fishermen's Association of Thiruvaikulam has said the fishermen were arrested when they were fishing in the deep waters between India and Sri Lanka, and that 2 of their mechanized boats were seized by the Sri Lankan Navy. It is the Tamil Nadu BJP chief who took cognizance of the matter and has taken representatives of the fishermen community along with him to meet with External Affairs Minister Jai Shankar in Delhi, who said that necessary measures would be taken to address that matter. The Sensex, meanwhile, has fallen by 166 points, and the Nifty dips amid the global market jitters. We do have the benchmark stock market indices falling sharply in the afternoon trading session today and surging in early trade. The Director General of the Goods and Services Tax Intelligence has issued show cause notices to 10 foreign airlines, including British Airways, Lufthansa, Oman Air, Emirates, and Singapore Airlines, for alleged non-payment of taxes totaling 10,000 crore rupees. And the High Commission of India in London advising Indian travelers to exercise caution and stay vigilant while traveling in the UK. This follows the UK's worst outbreak of rioting in more than a decade, where violent protesters have reportedly attacked migrants, especially Muslims. The UK government, meanwhile, has paused plans to raise the minimum income requirement for sponsoring a family member on a family visa. The current threshold of £29,000 will remain until a review by the Migration Advisory Committee is complete. The decision will benefit Indians, the second biggest group to avail this facility last year. President Draupadi Murmu received the Companion of the Order of Fiji, the nation's highest civilian award, during her historic visit, when she emphasized India's commitment to partnering with Fiji for mutual prosperity. She was today conferred the Companion of the Order, the country's highest civilian award, as she hailed the ties between the two countries and said India stands ready to partner with Fiji to build a stronger, resilient, and more prosperous nation. She's on a 2-day visit to Fiji and described the honor as a reflection of the deep ties of friendship between India and Fiji. And this is the first visit by an Indian head of state to the archipelago nation. She addressed the Fijian parliament also. Neeraj Chopra needed just one throw to sail into the final. It was one of intent and throwing down the gauntlet. A season's best of 89.34 in his first attempt in the qualification saw the 26-year-old defending Olympic champion comfortably through to the August 8th final. And the final looks stacked and set for fireworks with Neeraj's Czech rival Jakub Waldek, who has a personal best of 99.8 in that mix. Indian ambassador to France, Javed Ashraf, hosted Olympic bronze medalist Manu Bhaker and her coach Jaspal Rana at his residence in Paris and gifted the English translation of the Bhagavad Gita to her as she scripted history at the Paris Olympics by clinching 2 bronze medals at the air pistols event and the 10 meters air pistol mixed event also. Group Captain Subhanshu Shukla will most likely become the first Indian in space in 40 years, with ISRO naming the prime astronaut for the first ISRO-NASA mission to be to the International Space Station, scheduled for any time after October of this year. And ISRO said it had selected the 39-year-old group captain for this mission. And also, along with him, Group Captain Prasant Balakrishnan Nair, who is only 48 years old, named Shukla as the prime astronaut. He would be the one who would go to the International Space Station. The search and rescue operation in the Wayanad landslide, which killed more than 360 people, entered its final stages on the 7th day today, and the focus will now be more concentrated on the Chaliyar River basin and the areas that are inaccessible via traditional means. A special team by helicopter has been deployed to search the water body for more bodies or remains. 6 were recovered on the 7th day today, and as many as 30 bodies and 154 body parts were cremated through interfaith prayers. And among the 30 bodies, 14 were women and 13 men, and 3 could not be identified as male or female. A total of 1,174 personnel from various forces deployed in 6 zones for the search and rescue operation. We have former Deputy Prime Minister and veteran BJP leader Lal Krishna Advani, who was today admitted to Delhi's Apollo Hospital. The 96-year-old leader's condition is said to be stable. The Enforcement Directorate filed a supplementary charge sheet against ex-Railway Minister Lalu Prasad, his son Tejashwi Yadav, and 8 others in the Land for Jobs scam, and the charge sheet was filed before a special judge who posted the matter for consideration on the 13th of this month. And a petition has been filed in the Supreme Court challenging the Bombay High Court's order upholding the ban imposed in a private college in Mumbai on the wearing of a hijab, a niqab, or a burqa by students on the campus. The lawyer representing the petitioners mentioned the petition before Chief Justice of India for urgent listing, saying unit tests would take place soon. We also have the Bombay High Court dismissing that plea on the 26th of June, ruling that the dress code issued by the college was in larger academic interests and did not suffer from infirmity so as to violate provisions of Article 19 and Article 25 of the Constitution. But now it is with the Supreme Court. The Ram Temple Museum in Ayodhya will be developed by the Tata Sons, a parent company of the Tata Group. The state cabinet gave it consent to the proposal in this regard. Arshad Nadeem cruised to the Olympic javelin final with the solid 86.59-meter throw in today's qualifier round at the Stade de France, keeping the nation's hopes for an Olympic medal well alive in Pakistan. His season-best throw, the first and only of the qualifier, currently keeps him at 4th position, heading into Thursday night's finals. The National Assembly passed a bill seeking to bar independent lawmakers from joining a party after a stipulated period, with the opposition PTI voicing a strong protest against it. In this news out of Islamabad, the bill titled Elections Act 2024 has introduced amendments to the Elections Act 2017 and is being seen by political observers as a move to frustrate the Supreme Court's July 12th ruling, which had declared that the PTI is eligible for reserved seats and also set it to re-emerge as the single largest party in the National Assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have in the news for you today, and we hope that is enough information for you to take on the day today. Wishing you all a lovely Tuesday. It is today, the 6th of August. And for those of you who would like to reach me directly, my number is 214-675